Hi guys, I read 65 books in 2022 and I only started reading in June. I used to be a serial reader and then I stopped when I got to college. I'm a senior in college now. I started back again this summer in June when I was in England and I read 65 books and I'm obsessed. In honor of 2022 being over, I picked my 22 favorite books. It was kind of hard, but also I'm so excited to talk about them. They're not in any order because I just can't rank, but towards the end of the video is when I'm going to show you like my favorite, like the best of the best, but these are all so good and you have to read these if you haven't already. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first book that I have to talk about is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, and I know you've heard a million people talk about this. It's actually so good. This is a YA romance and this is about Liz and Wes and it's enemies to lovers. But the reason why I love this, other than the adorable cover and the movie quotes at the beginning of every single chapter, is because it is just so realistic. I was super cringy in high school. I still am. This shows the intricacies and the realisticness of high school and how cringy it is. It just took me back to a time where I was just laughing reading this because it's just so cringy and I just love this book. It just made me super happy. It's super cheesy, but if you know that going into it, you're gonna love this book. So this is really lighthearted. I did read The Do-Over a couple weeks ago and that one was kind of okay. I didn't love that book, but this one, super good. Okay, the next book I read on my Kindle and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book is about January and Augustus. Both of them are authors who have writer's block, so they go to beach houses and they run into each other and meet each other and decide to each write the opposite genre of books, and they take each other on research dates and it's just so good. And I loved the banter and I loved that Emily Henry book. It was the second Emily Henry book that I read and it was the first one that I actually fell in love with, so I loved Beach Read. The next book is The Silent Patient by Alex, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name so I'm not gonna butcher it, but I read this book in one day and this book is pretty thick. It's like 350 pages and the print is really small. But this book is about Alicia who shoots her husband in the head and then goes completely silent, does not speak. We follow Theo, who is a psychologist who wants to study her, so he goes to where she is staying and just studies her and tries to find out what happened and why she shot her husband. So good. I read this book directly after I read Better Than the Movies and such a shift change, but this one was so good. I loved it. It was 5 stars up until 90%, and then when the plot twist happened I was like, whoa, what is going on here? I can't believe this is happening. I didn't catch it at all, and then I kind of took my time and thought about the plot twist and I didn't really like it that much anymore, so that's why this is only 4.5 stars, but so good. If you need something to get you out of a rut, this will do it. Okay, the next book, I don't have the physical copy on me, but it is Everything Beautiful in Its Time, Seasons of Lost and Love by Jenna Bush. Jenna is an anchor on the Today Show. Reading about her story was so captivating to me and it wasn't politically driven at all. There was nothing political in it. It was just about losing her grandparents and how special they were to her and how she navigated that loss and having to be so public about it, and it really still stuck with me. It's just about love and grief, and I think that it really hits home because they are such a public family, so you can really see faces when you are reading this book. It's so good. Nobody talked about it, probably because of who it was written by, but it was really well done. I highly recommend that if you're into nonfiction. That's the only nonfiction book that is on this list. The next book I've never heard anyone talk about, probably because it was written by an Irish author and I got it in England, and it's called Boys Don't Cry by Fiona Scarlett. This reads like poetry. It is so good. I don't really know how to describe this book, but I'll read the back. They say boys don't cry, but Finn's seen his dad do it when he thinks no one's looking. So that's not true. And isn't it okay to be sad when bad things happen? They say boys don't cry, but you might. You're gonna cry reading this book. It's told from 2 different POVs, both brothers, but they're told in alternating timelines. So you're told the present from the older brother's perspective and what the family is going through now, and then you're told the past and what led to that from the younger brother's perspective. It's just a very domestic story, good but so devastating in the best way possible. It's a little hard to read because there's nuances in the language that's definitely Irish, that's very different from American writing, but you can still figure it out, and it is so good. If you can get your hands on it, definitely read it. The next book you've definitely heard of, but it is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was the first book I read by this author, and there are 2 more on this list. It is, oh my god, it's so good. So this book is about Evelyn Hugo, and she is a Hollywood star, but she's older and she decides to tell her life story, and she had 7 husbands. So this book is actually split up into 7 different sections for each one of her husbands, and it's just about her life story and the drama that goes on, and kind of about how what you see as an outsider following your favorite Hollywood star is completely different than what's actually going on behind the scenes, and you see that, and it's so much fun and just so good, and there's a giant plot twist at the end, and I cried. So good, you have to read this. Okay, next up we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Now, I didn't love this book when I first read it, but I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I read this back in May or August, I think, and I still can't stop thinking about it. It's kind of a hefty book for a romance book, but it's super good. The cover is so cute. This is about Nora and Charlie. It's enemies to lovers, and that's basically all you need to know about it. It's just such a good romance story. It's Emily Henry, so there's always something else going on. This explores Nora's and her sister's relationship, and that's really well done. Super good. The banter is really good, and that's why I will forgive it being so long, but it's just super good, super endearing. A good beach read, if you will, and I love this book. Okay, the next book I don't have with me is at school. It is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I have heard a lot of complaints about this book, but I will tell you why I loved it. I read it in October. It's really atmospheric. Whoa, I definitely said that wrong, but you get what I mean. I would read it in between classes. There's not really a plot, but if you love really magical books, you would love this one. It's about a circus that just appears out of nowhere, and the crazy people and things that happen within that circus, and it's just so good. There's this big competition between 2 people, but they don't really want to be in that competition themselves. It doesn't make a ton of sense when I try to explain it to you, but I would just read the first page of the book and you will be enthralled. It is so good and magical, and I really want to read a couple other of her books in 2023. If you love lots of plot, then don't read this, but if you love magical reads and just really great atmosphere, you'll love this book. Okay, the next book I've also never seen anyone talk about, but I got in England, so that might be why, and that is This Can Never Not Be Real by Sarah Milano. Definitely check trigger warnings. There's a ton, but it followed 5 different perspectives, and it is about how they deal in a traumatic situation. It is about a shooting that goes on, and it's super traumatic and lots of people die, and this is 5 people's stories and 5 different viewpoints about what they do, how they survive, and if they survive, and it is so good and sad and shocking and very raw and real, and I don't know why you would want to read this book. I was in England and I saw the title, like the cover, and I was like, whoa, that seems interesting, and I loved it, and I just love being angry and sad, so that's why I read it. But I really would recommend it if you like raw emotions when you read. It is crazy and just beautifully done, and one thing I love about this book is that you don't ever hear from the shooter's perspectives or why they did what they did, because that's not what matters, and that's not whose stories that we want to hear. So really well done. Okay, next up I have Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, and I only have 2 Coho books on this list because I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of her stories, but this one was really good. I cried a lot. It is about, I don't remember the main character's name, but she goes to prison and she's released from prison all these years later, and it's about her trying to navigate being in this town where everybody knows her for doing something horrible, and how she finds love, and it's just so crazy because the whole thing is just so morally gray. At that point in my life when I read that book, I was very black and white, and I wasn't morally gray. Like, I didn't like hearing people out when things were morally gray, if that makes sense. And that one really made me think a lot, and it was really good. I think the writing is really good compared to her other books. It seems a lot more intelligent, if that makes sense, and it's a really good book. So I would recommend that one from Colleen Hoover. The next book I also read on my Kindle, and that is 1,000 Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. Now, the writing is horrible. It's very YA. It is a YA novel, and you can tell that it's YA, but I don't know what it did. I was literally like sobbing on my bed the entire time I was reading this. It's so sad. It is about Poppy and Rune and their childhood friends, but they're also like childhood lovers. Like, they always liked each other. It's about their love story, but Poppy and Rune move away from each other, and Rune doesn't hear from Poppy like at all, and then she just comes back, and it's about that whole story, and you find out why she hasn't talked to him, and it's just devastating, and you just have to read it if you're in the mood for a sad book. The next book I actually read a couple weeks ago. I was gonna save it for when I went on a beach vacation in a couple of months, but I just had to read it. It's One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I did not hear a ton of people talk about it this year, but it's been in a ton of reading wrap-ups. A lot of people loved it. I just think the plot of it super unique. So this is about Emma, and she marries her husband. They are high school sweethearts, and he gets into a helicopter accident and dies, and that's devastating. And a couple years later, she reconnected with another guy from high school and fell in love with him after going through all of this grief, and they're engaged, and she gets a phone call from her ex-husband who she thought was dead. Turns out he wasn't dead, and he says that he is coming home, and it's about how she deals with that and who she picks. Crazy. It's literally crazy. It's also like really well done. I almost feel like this book's fairly short. It's only like 300 pages. I think if it was like 400 or 500 pages, a lot more could have been explored, and that could have been way better, but it was really good. I've never read anything like this before, and I really recommend it. It's also, like I said, a short book, so a great beach read. Okay, next up we have the other Colleen Hoover book on this list. My favorite Colleen Hoover book ever that I've read so far, Heartbones. Okay, literally it is so good. The cover is beautiful. I have it on my Kindle. Such a good book. I highly recommend it. I got my dad to read it, and he also liked it. Heartbones, about a young girl whose parents are separated, and her mom dies, so she decides to go move and live with her dad, but her dad doesn't know that her mom died. And it's about her summer, and she meets all of these people that she becomes friends with, and she meets Samson, and it's about their love story, but of course there's a huge plot twist at the end, and it's crazy. I didn't see it coming. I probably should have seen it coming, but I think I was just so enthralled in the book. I didn't see it coming, and it's so good. I just love the book. It didn't feel like Colleen was trying to manipulate us in any way like I feel like she does in her other books. It just felt so young and just so happy to me, and that is why I love Heartbones. I can't recommend it enough. It's so good. It's so happy. It was such a good summer read. My heart goes out to those characters. I just love them. I just love them so much, and like the end is just so good. It's so good. Please read Heartbones. I can't like say too much about these books without completely spoiling them, but I hope you get the gist. Okay, the next book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just read this like a month ago. Oh my god, it's so good. So Daisy Jones and the Six is a rock band, and it's kind of about how they formed, the intricacies of it, if they actually liked each other, like what happened with it, like the sadness and the reality of being in a rock band and being in the spotlight and being in fame. It's just so good, and the way it's told is an interview style, so there's no actual dialogue. The characters are getting interviewed and you're seeing that, so it really felt like I was reading a magazine. It was just so good. I think a lot of different people will like it regardless of what type of genre that they like to read. Okay, next, everybody and their mother has heard of this series. I didn't read it, okay, because middle school me fell in love with another one of her series and then refused to read anything else because I was like, everyone is playing with me. Like, I read the Superior series, I'm not reading anything else. I read it this Thanksgiving because it was blowing up on TikTok. It's ACOTAR, A Court and Thorn of Roses. That entire series, I binged it in less than a week, which I didn't even know was possible, but somehow I did it. If you like fantasy and fairies, but primarily romance and love stories, you'll love this. My favorites were, don't judge me on this, A Court of Wings and Ruin for the original trilogy. That one is so good. I didn't love the second one as much as everyone says that they love it. Like, it's still good, but that was not my favorite. A Court of Wings and Ruin was so much better. It was all about the war and strategy, and I just eat that up. I eat it up. And then my actual favorite of the series is The Court of Silver Flames. So good. I loved Nesta's story. It was just so good. Heartbreaking. And I also love Cassian. He is my book boyfriend, my favorite book boyfriend. I'm in love with him. Come on. I don't know why everyone doesn't have my same opinion on what books that they like better. Like, I just don't understand why people don't love those two books. I recommend this series, okay? It's just so good. It's so good. Next up, I have If We Were Villains by ML Rio. Oh my god, it's so good. This was my first glimpse into dark academia, and I'm glad I didn't read it right away when I was first getting back into reading, because it was a little hard to read. But it's about these kids that go to a boarding school. They're more like teenagers, and they converse in Shakespeare. Like, their emotions and what they feel is just so intense and so raw. The only way that they can converse to each other is in Shakespeare. It's crazy. But then something tragic happens, a murder, and it's a murder mystery. It's like, who did it? Like, will these people betray each other? Will they have each other's back? It's just crazy. It's so crazy. It's like so dark and spooky, and I recommend it. I really recommend it. Okay, the next book I don't recommend, but I think about it literally every single day. It is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book was depressing. So many things made me cry this year when I was reading it, but this like actually made me cry because I was just traumatized reading it. Check the trigger warnings, because it's not like, oh, like suicide is a trigger warning, like, oh, we'll mention it once and that's it, like that was traumatic but we're not talking about it again. No, like, this has in-depth descriptions, and I've seen a lot of people like talk about how they don't like the book because it is just dark for no reason. Like, it just does it to trigger us and there's no actual reason. But I still like think about that book every single day, and I think about Jude, and just it just shows like the depth of emotions, and I just love it when books make me feel. So that's why this book is on here. I literally wouldn't recommend it unless you are in the mood to get destroyed and wrecked. And it just follows a friend group grow up. The next book I reread for the second time this year because it blew up on TikTok. Again, it was the original Book Talk book, and I had to remember if it was actually as good as I remembered it, and it is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So good. I love Greek mythology, like the Odyssey, all-time favorite book, one of them. So good. So I had to read this. I just absolutely had to, and it was so good. It was just as good as I remembered. Rereading it, the writing is so beautiful. Even if you don't like Greek mythology, if you are a fan of beautiful writing, you will love this. It gets you, like, you will cry. The pain of reading this book, so real, but just so good, and it's beautiful. You probably have already all read it, but this book is so good. It's an all-time favorite of mine for sure. We're almost done. The next book I've never heard anyone talk about, but you have to read it. It's a debut novel from a British author. It is Sunset by Jessie Cave. Oh my god, you'll sense a theme with all of my favorite books, and that is that they're sad and they trigger emotion. This book is about two sisters, Ruth and Hannah, and one of them dies, and it's about the other one dealing with her death. And that's kind of what the whole book is about, but it's so good, and the plot seems so simple for such a thick book, but grief is real and it has no ends, and this book really exploits that and describes that, and it is just so good. And I am really close with my older sister, So that's probably why I resonated with this book so much, because I was thinking about my sister when I was reading this, and it's just so good. If you have a sister or a sibling, you should read this book. It is honestly one of my favorite books I read all year. Okay, 3 more books. So we have Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I also read Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren this year, and that didn't make it on this list. I know, controversial, right? That's because Every Summer After was kind of the same thing, but a million times better. This book is about Percy and Sam. If you know the plot of Love in Other Words, then that is what this book is, except, like I said, it's better. They're childhood friends, 2 lovers, something happens, mistakes were made, they don't talk for years and years and years, reconnect 11 years later, I think it is, and it's about them resolving that trauma and falling back in love. And it is so good, because it has the depressing element that I love in my books. Like, it was so sad I cried, but also just happy at times, and just so beautiful, and just a great love story. Okay, so I have 2 books left. I didn't know what to talk about first, but these 2 were my favorite books of the year, like hands down. Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. So good. The copy of the book that I have is back in my dorm room, and I annotated the whole thing. It is just so good. This book is about Archer and Bree, and they both had really traumatic pasts, and Bree moves to this small town for a little bit, and she meets Archer, and they fall in love. Archer doesn't talk. He doesn't have a voice, and they speak in sign language to each other, which I loved because I wear hearing aids. I just love this book. I cried multiple times throughout this book. I had heard people say it was boring, so I was scared to read it. I don't know how anyone can say that. It was just so good. It was so beautiful to see 2 very broken people coming together. Archer is very isolated in this book, so Bree is kind of Archer's everything, like his first everything, and just to see like the length they go to for each other, and just like they'll be in the middle of a fight, but like that doesn't matter. Like, it's just so good. It is so good. Everyone needs to read this. It is just, oh my god, it's so good. So good. All right, and the number 1 book of 2022 is a reread. And I just reread it a couple days ago. I finished it, and I remembered why this is my favorite series ever. Okay, it is Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas. Okay, hear me out. I am currently rereading Throne of Glass for the 3rd time. Okay, the first 2 times I read it, I was in middle school, high school, loved it. Right now I'm tandem reading Tower of Dawn, Empire of Storms. I've never did the tandem read before. I'm in love with it. Like, I feel like I'm reading something completely different. I love every book in the series, but that book is just so good. I would be reading it and like remembering things from years and years ago when I was reading it. It was just so good. Everything is masterfully done. It moved the plot along so well, and I was just in tears. I was in tears. It's such a good book. You meet so many new characters that are just so good, and it's just an amazing book. If you have not read Throne of Glass, you need to read it, okay? I don't care if you like ACOTAR. Throne of Glass is better. I'm telling you this. I don't know if it's because I'm biased, because I fell in love with it as a middle schooler, and it's still my favorite book series all these years later, but it is just so good, and you have to read it. You just have to read it. I'm begging you. I might do a reading vlog on reading Kingdom of Ash, because I have no recollection of that book, and I only read that book once. But you have to read Throne of Glass. It's so good. Queen of Shadows specifically, I would die for that book. Alright, those were my top 22 books of 2022. This video is way longer than I thought it was going to be, so thank you for making it to the end. If you have, I love you guys, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.